Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Oh Shoot. I'm your host, Cassidy Lynne, and we're back. Today's episode is actually going to be so I've done something like this before, but it's going to be a little bit different. We're going to talk about flash photography today. If you're new here, this is a photography podcast. Welcome. Here we go. So flash photography, I get so many questions about this on my Instagram, like my stories, like anytime I post anything about a flash, I'm always getting DMs, comments, whatever. And I've posted episodes about flash in the past, but I just kind of want to revisit the topic. We're going to talk about manual settings. We're talking about a few different things. So yeah, hopefully this episode will be helpful for you guys. Definitely save this episode for later. Take notes. This is going to be up on YouTube. You'll be able to rewatch this and re-listen to it. I think it'll be really helpful for you. And I basically went on my Instagram and I asked you guys what questions you guys have about flash. So I'm quite literally just going through and answering all of your flash questions. Now I want to preface this by saying I'm not a flash expert. I actually don't use off-camera flash. So any questions about that, I didn't answer because I don't use it. I would say I'm a novice flash user, but I'm not like the most experienced flash user ever. Like I don't know all of like the technical specs. Like sometimes when I need to change a setting or something, I kind of fumble around. I don't know really where I'm going. So I'm just sharing with you guys what I know and hopefully that's helpful for you. So let's get into it, shall we? So first question about flash. What flash settings can help my flash recycle faster? I feel like this is the most commonly asked question. This is what everyone wants to know. How do I get my flash to be faster? Because flashes can be slow. They love to take their dear sweet time. And in my years of photography, I've noticed that certain flashes do this more often, and there are certain things that can help with this. So, I actually have like a little answer here and then I'll kind of expand on it. So if the flash power on a flash is too high and the recycle speed is really slow. So if you don't know, recycle speed basically means how fast the flash fires. The flash might not keep up with the camera's continuous shooting speed. To avoid this, you avoid using TTL mode. When you're using TTL mode, a pre-flash is issued. So it'll be like a little half flash that goes off for metering before the main flash goes off, which can slightly delay the recycling process. And basically, my advice has always been to use TTL mode, but I literally cannot argue this. It does make your flash a little bit slower. So we're going to talk about manual flash settings in a little bit, but that might be something to consider. There are other things that impact your flash's recycle time. A big thing that I've noticed is my flash battery. I used to use a flash that used AA's, and I would have to change out my AA's halfway through a wedding, like halfway through a reception. Whereas now I have rechargeable lithium batteries, which just came with my flash. Like it's a battery made for my flash. And I can go 3, 4, 5 weddings without charging that thing and it never slows down. It's so much better. So that's another thing that really helps. So if you find that your recycle time is slow, a setting to change on your flash is actually taking it off TTL mode and moving it to manual mode, because TTL is going to take, that initial like half flash to meter, and then it's going to do the full flash. Okay. I have a zoom lens, but in TTL mode, the focal length doesn't change. Is that okay? Yes, it is okay. It's not like the world is going to end, but basically your focal length on the flash, basically what that means is you're telling the flash how much light it needs to disperse. Because if you have a like let's say you have a fisheye lens, you have a lot that you're capturing. Therefore, the flash needs to be like wider, right? Like it needs to disperse wider. But if you're using something like an 85 or let's say a 70 millimeter, you're really focused on this little section right in front of you. Therefore, the flash needs to be more directed straightforward. Like it's not going to go as wide. So I might say if you're using a 24 to 70, leave that focal length around like 50 millimeters. That's like a nice halfway. If you find yourself gravitating more towards always using like the wider end of your zoom, then maybe do like 24 millimeters on your flash, or vice versa. If you find yourself always zooming in on your zoom lens, then maybe lean towards like the 70 side of it. So it's okay if your focal length doesn't change on your flash. How do you expose your camera settings properly for flash? This is something I want to stop and talk about for a little bit. Your settings on your camera for flash. Let's get into it. Okay. So when you're using a flash, the most important setting is your shutter speed, because you want your shutter speed to be synced up to go off, to capture at the same time that your flash is going off. So you want your shutter to basically, capture the flash as it's flashing, right? And sometimes people have the issue of having a big dark area on the bottom, like literally a dark line on the bottom of your photo or the top. And what that is your camera is quite literally capturing the shutter, opening or closing too quickly. So because of that, we want to make sure that our shutter speed is lined up with our flash well. This depends on the flash. You can look this up in your flash's manual. You could Google it. Typically, anywhere under 1/250 is flash territory. Any faster than that, and your shutter speed will be going off too quickly. Your flash fires, you're going to have like those bands, those lines in your end result photo. And it's just like, it feels weird to have your shutter speed that low, but the flash is what's going to capture what's happening, right? It's hard to picture. And we're going to talk about like shutter drag too in a minute, but that flash going off is essentially, that's the picture. When the flash goes off, like that flash is it's freezing everything in place, and that's what it's capturing. So a lower shutter speed. Typically when I'm shooting, I want to say I'm doing like 1/160 or 1/200, just kind of depends. I find that doesn't actually make a big difference with my flash. A lot of the times a flash, when you put it on your camera, it doesn't even like let you go above, like it won't let you go to 1/1000 for your shutter speed. Like a lot of flashes are like programmed to not even let your shutter speed go higher than it like will look good. So that shutter speed, right? Let's say 1/200 is what we use. Then we're going to do ISO and aperture. I would recommend setting your aperture next. This is going to be 100% stylistic because you're using a flash. We're not really worried about like having your aperture super low to let more light in. I want you more to think about, how do I want this photo to look? Do I want that blurred background look? Do I want like the distance? Do I want everything to be in focus? I find that for like dancing photos at a reception, I want my aperture pretty high. Just because there's a lot of people, there's a lot happening. Sometimes it's fun to get multiple people in focus, on different planes. So, I would say my aperture is probably around like 3.5, for flash photos. That's pretty standard for me, sometimes 2.8, but I'm not usually going very low. I also find that flash is kind of bright and it kind of can be a lot in an image. So I am usually trying to darken it just a little bit. In my ISO, this is also going to depend on if you're bouncing your flash or if you're doing direct flash. Most of the time your ISO is pretty low. Direct flash, you're easily ISO 100. That's what I'm doing. But if you're bouncing your flash or something, and you're not 100% relying on that flash to be all the source of light, you might be doing something around like 250, 300, I don't know. But I feel like for me, my ISO is usually pretty low with my camera. Yeah. And so those are the main settings that you're going to pick and choose. Once you have those camera settings down, the rest of it really is playing with your flash settings. So your camera settings, you kind of just pick something, it's there, but then the flash settings are going to fine tune the exact exposure of your image. That is if you're using manual mode. TTL mode will kind of just adapt to it and basically just use whatever brightness it needs to get the photo properly exposed. A little side note here. I've been using TTL mode on my flash, but I've been lowering my like exposure meter on my flash. So I've been finding, okay, like it's kind of bright, especially when I'm doing direct flash. So I'll bring it down to like -1 or something to make it slightly like not as bright. Just so I'm not like overexposing the heck out of stuff. Okay. Would I recommend a MagSphere diffuser? What am I saying? Would I recommend a MagSphere diffuser for the Godox V1? I actually don't know what that is. Hold on. MagSphere diffuser. Oh, I know what this is. These are like, they look like little like mushroom tops to like a flash. And it basically, you just put it on top of your flash, like over top of where the light flashes. I'm like, I don't know the word. I wish I knew the technical terms for like the different parts of the flash, but it's like this little diffuser thing that just like goes on top of the flash. You like wrap it around the top, and then when it fires, it's supposed to make the light diffuse better. It's supposed to make it softer. Would I recommend it? I would say yeah. I think it can be helpful, especially if you're trying to create a little bit of a softer look. If direct flash, or, you know, when you use your flash, you find it being pretty harsh. You know, maybe there are times where you don't have something to like bounce your flash off of too. Like if there's no white walls or something, a diffuser would be a really good option. So yeah, I would recommend it. I would say, when you're doing your test shots for whatever scenario you're setting up, like if it's a dance floor or something, you're doing your test shots, keep it on hand, see if you like it better or not. I think it would be a good tool just to have on hand, just in case, like I said, you ever need to do something that isn't direct flash, you need something that's a little bit softer. Yeah, I would say that would be a good option. It's only $50 too, in case you guys are wondering. At B&H, it's $50. Amazon, it's a little bit more expensive. Actually, no, it's $60. So yeah. Okay. What do I need to know about manual flash settings? So this is the part where I want to get into talking about manual settings on your flash and kind of how to do that whole thing. So there's two different types of flash settings. We have TTL mode, which is through the lens mode. That is auto mode for your flash. Or there's manual mode. That is essentially manual. It is you changing the brightness of your flash, all of that. You get full control over that. I have heard that people love manual mode. I am determined for this year to start using manual and messing around with manual flash settings, especially after hearing that your flash recycles faster if you use manual mode. Like, to me, I'm like, okay, maybe it's time. But I do think if I ever were to switch to manual mode, I would still use TTL mode if my subject was moving. And that is what is highly recommended. If your subject is moving around, for example, a dance floor, like stuff like that, TTL mode is great because if a subject is right next to you, the flash will look great. If the subject is far away from you, the flash will also like be able to account for that. Whereas if you're using manual flash and manual settings, it's just firing the same amount of light every time based on the settings that you gave it. In manual camera settings, not camera settings. It's confusing. The difference between manual camera settings and manual flash settings is confusing. The difference between the two, like TTL mode is automatic. Manual is literally manual on your flash. There's two main things on your flash, two main settings we're going to be changing. The power, which is the fraction number. This is always very confusing for people. It's kind of giving like shutter speed sometimes, but the fraction is going to be the power. Okay, keep that in mind. And then we've got the focal length. The focal length is how widespread the flash is going to disperse the light. Okay, we talked about that. So those are the two main manual flash settings that we're changing. Manual flash allows you to choose the amount of light for your shot regardless of your camera settings. So the power for your flash is measured in a fraction. So just to help you guys understand, the 1/1 fraction, so that is literally 1, okay? The number 1 is going to give you the brightest flash, okay? So the easiest way to think about that is think of it in actual fractions of the light, okay? If my light in my flash is 1 equals total 1. If I want it to be darker, I'm going to only do a percentage of that. Okay. So I'm going to go down to like 1/32. That's going to be darker than 1/1, right? Because 1/1 is 100%. 1/32 is like just a fraction of it. So that's going to be the best way I can describe that to help you guys remember that, is that fraction is basically the fraction that you want the flash to go off the percentage of that total light. Okay. I feel like I'm not saying that well, but you guys know what I mean. So you can adjust to 1/4, you can adjust to 1/2 or 1/8, whatever power you need. And this right here is going to be, you're basically going to want to determine how bright you want your flash to be at this point. The power equals the total exposure. So you're going to get all your camera settings down, whatever. We're going to go into the power of our flash, and this is the final step that is going to expose your image. So make sure your power is exactly how you want it to be for these photos. Okay. That's the main thing. Okay. This is figuring out the final exposure is the power. On a manual flash, there's also the focal length number, and that essentially is going to indicate how wide or how narrow the flashlight will spread, essentially mimicking the field of view of a lens with that focal length. A lower number means wider light spread, so a wide angle lens. A higher number, so a higher millimeter, let's say 70 millimeters or 120 millimeters, means a more focused beam, like a telephoto lens. So you should generally set your flash focal length to match the focal length of your camera lens for optimal lighting. So it really is that simple. Like if you're using a 35 millimeter, set your millimeter on your flash to 35 millimeter. Like that's what you're going to basically do. You want it to match essentially. And then I also wanted to talk about the order of the settings and setting it all up. So it seems like a lot because it's like, okay, I have my manual camera settings, but then I also have my manual flash settings. Like this is really overwhelming. So first you're going to frame a test shot. Let's say it's a cake cutting. Okay. We're going to frame that up. We're going to stand where we want to stand. The cake is there. Maybe the couple's not there, but you've got it all set up there. First you're going to set your desired aperture on your camera. So aperture, whatever you want it to be. Let's say it's 2.8. You need to set your shutter speed to what it needs to be for your specific flash. Like we were talking about 1/200 or something like that. Your ISO, set it to like whatever it needs to be. Maybe like 1/100, 1/200. You can go in and change that if you notice, okay, I have my flash full power right now and it's still too dark. That's when you're going to go in and like change your ISO. So we're going to set it around 100, 200, something like that, 400. And then the last step is changing the power of your flash. So like I just talked about, that power, the fraction on your flash is going to be the final determining factor for your overall exposure. Okay. Okay, that was a lot. We're going to move on to more questions, but boy, oh boy, did I just cranked that out. Okay. What is an entry-level flash for a Canon? Reasonably priced. So I don't shoot Canon. So I did a little bit of research to find top recommended stuff. I do shoot Sony though. And my main recommendation has been the Godox V1. Godox V1 actually is now the Godox V100, I think. Rumor has it, I'm not sure if this is true, but the Godox V1 Pro, like they stopped selling it. I remember I tried to find it and they stopped selling it and they had to change it to the Godox V100 because like some other company I think was coming for them because of that circular flash head. Don't quote me on that. So it was kind of like a whole thing where they had to like change things, whatever. So the Godox V1, aka the Godox V100, I would recommend the Godox V1C, which is Godox V1. The C stands for Canon. It's not entry level, but you can find it reasonably priced on eBay. I found one for $190. Typically, you're not going to find a flash for under $100. If you are, it's probably going to take like AA batteries. It might not perform the best. So just heads up on that. Another recommendation would be the Godox TT685C, which I found for $130. I personally have been loving Godox. I used a Sony brand flash for a while. And once I switched to Godox, I just found that the performance was better, recycle time, all that. I love the rechargeable battery aspect of it. So this version of Godox, the Godox TT685C2, rechargeable battery, things like that. It's just great, a great option. So yeah, that's what I would recommend. Next question is, how do you get long exposure with the flash? So you're talking about shutter drag. I will explain this as best as I can. When I'm doing shutter drag, I would recommend TTL mode because subjects are moving, and messing around with your camera settings at the same time as messing with your flash settings is a lot. So if it's your first time doing it, set your flash in auto mode, so TTL mode, so then you can focus on your camera settings. Okay. And essentially there's a perfect camera setting combo to help you get long exposure. There's a couple things that play into it. One thing is just making sure that external lights are present. So a great example of this is at a wedding, you've got string lights like over the dance floor or something. Those are great for shutter drag is what it's called. So what you're going to do, ISO is going to be as low as it can be, 100, because what's going to happen is we're going to be using direct flash, and our shutter is going to be open for a long time. So it's going to be really bright. So the ISO is at 100. You're going to put your aperture, start it at like f8. Okay. So it needs to be really, really high. The reason being is because sometimes like it's hard to catch focus. Also, we need to bring down that exposure. And then your shutter speed, this is what's going to be really important. So you get those like light leaks and like that dragging in your photo by having a really low shutter. I would start with like, just bring it down to like 1/, I don't know, have it open for like a little less than a second, I would say. And just mess around with this number. If it's open too long, you'll have too many drags in your photo, and then it's like you can't even see your subject. So there's definitely a good balance. And what you're going to do is your flash is going to go off. You're going to do direct flash. When you hit that shutter button, the flash goes off. And essentially what it does is it freezes your subject, and whatever is happening, that's the picture. When the flash goes off, that's the picture. But the shutter stays open, and that's when you drag your camera in like a sweeping motion or something, and you're going to get like these little light leaks and like these fun little drags all over the image. So what you've captured is you've frozen the image with the flash, but then the shutter stays open. The rest of the image is dark except for the external lights that are there. And those external lights are still being captured by your shutter or by your sensor, I guess. And that's why you're going to drag your camera and it's going to get a couple of light leaks and then the shutter closes. So it's a little confusing, but truly just that shutter aperture ISO combo, messing around with that. Sometimes also I find that standing in certain places on a dance floor is better for shutter drag than other places. Sometimes I'll be standing in one corner and there's like no external lights and it looks really boring. And then I stand in the other corner and I get so many light leaks. So it just kind of depends. You kind of have to mess around with that as well. Oh boy. Okay. That was a lot. Also, long exposure shutter drag is hard because you have to be really good at freezing your subject and knowing where to drag your camera to. Because sometimes I'll drag my camera around and I'll look back at the photo and the light leak is right over my subject's face. And then, that sucks. So it's a lot of pre-planning. It's a lot of figuring out, okay, if I sweep in this motion, it'll be good for like making sure if my subject's in the center, that's good to sweep in that motion. But if I'm going to have my subject in the center, I can't sweep this way. It's a lot. It takes a lot of practice. I would recommend, if you want to practice it, put yourself in a dark room, get like one light or something, like a lamp or like a candle, and practice this. Do the flash going off, take a picture of something, and then drag that around and have the candle be your practice for the long exposure. We're jumping into an ad real quick to talk about a longtime sponsor of the podcast. You guys know it. You love it. We're talking about Aftershoot. If you already don't know about Aftershoot, let me enlighten you because your world is about to be changed. Aftershoot is the fastest photo culling and editing app out there. The best thing about Aftershoot to me is how fast it makes my editing and culling workflow. Basically, what Aftershoot specializes in is automated AI editing, which is tailored to your unique artistic style. So not only can it cull through thousands of images so fast, it knows your editing style and it will edit your photos tailored to your style based on your preset and your editing. So when you open Aftershoot, you will start with culling and it's going to cull your images quicker with AI assisted culling. Aftershoot can automatically cull your images by detecting unwanted photos, which saves you hours of your time. It'll group similar images, filter unwanted blinks, filter blurry photos. Then once you get done with culling, we head into Aftershoot edits. With only a few clicks, and I actually mean that, it's literally only like 2 or 3 clicks, Aftershoot will edit your photos just like you normally would in your own style. You can set up a personal AI profile in your style, so Aftershoot will know exactly how to edit. There's precision straightening and cropping tools that will automatically crop your photos for you. And if you're ever editing on like an airplane or something, Aftershoot is always available without the need for internet. And honestly, there's nothing worse than getting nickeled and dimed for a program like this, so Aftershoot offers unlimited images and sessions for one flat fee per month. So if you're like me and you edit thousands and thousands of photos at once, it doesn't matter how many photos you edit, you're always going to get charged the same price. And today for Shoot listeners, you can get 15% off for anyone who buys Aftershoot using the link in the description of this episode. Thank you so much, Aftershoot, for being a proud sponsor of the podcast. And now back to the show. Okay, moving along here. How do you point the flash directly at people? Oh, wait, what? Okay, I see. Sorry. Do you point the flash directly at people or at the wall, and why? So this question is essentially, where do I point my flash? There's mainly 2 options for you: directly at someone, or you can try to bounce your flash elsewhere. I typically am doing directly at my subjects. That style is really popular right now. It's pretty easy for me. It's really pretty when I go to edit it. Like, I really like how that looks. However, sometimes that's not really the vibe. And in that case, you will be bouncing the light. So what you want to think of is think of your flash head as a beam of light, or think of it as like a string. And when the flash goes off, that string goes in the direction of wherever your flash head is pointing. So if it's pointing directly at the ceiling, that string goes up to the ceiling. And then once it hits the ceiling, it disperses everywhere. Okay. Once that string hits a surface, it's going to explode. So pointing your flash directly at the ceiling is going to disperse the light off the ceiling. So it'll look really pretty if you have a white ceiling. Remember, light only bounces off of white. It won't bounce off of like things that are darker. If you bounce off the ceiling, that's really pretty. That's a great option, especially if you want something a little bit softer. Another way to get that softer look is with a diffuser. Like I was mentioning earlier, that person that asked about the mag mod diffuser or whatever it's called. What was it called? Magsphere, the Magsphere diffuser. That would be another great option. You have to think and be aware of what surfaces around you are white that you can bounce the flash off of. And you really want to take a lot of test shots and make sure that whatever direction your flash is pointing, that it's not creating weird shadows. If you have a white wall behind you, it's great to bounce it behind you because then it can disperse off and create really nice, even light directly on someone. If you're bouncing off the ceiling, sometimes that can cast a few shadows like under the eyes and under the chin and stuff like that. So it's just something to be aware of. Okay. Apart from learning your style, do you think it's necessary to use a flash when it's sunny? I would say no, unless that is your style. If you really I think of like using a flash when it's sunny. I think of like the G7X photos, like the photos that are really popular right now. But then I also think of like editorial magazine photos sometimes. And sometimes it makes things look like a green screen too, which can be kind of fun, but also not. So typically if I'm doing a shoot and someone's like, oh, I want it to be sunny, whatever, I'm usually not bringing my flash. There are occasions when I'm like, oh, I think it would be fun to try a flash. If it's like sunset, I might try a flash every once in a while, just to, I don't know, create some fun, different vibes. But in general, I don't think it's necessary unless that's your style. Okay. Can you switch from vertical to horizontal shooting without changing the alignment of your flash? Yes, only if you're pointing your flash directly forward. If you're bouncing off of a surface, naturally, if your flash is pointing up at the ceiling and you're shooting horizontal, when you switch to vertical, you have to switch that flash up back towards the ceiling. So typically if I am bouncing my flash, I'm not switching orientations because that takes a while. I mean, it doesn't take that long. It takes like an extra second, but that's why I like to shoot direct flash because I can kind of shoot however I want and I can switch from vertical, horizontal, whatever, and I don't have to change anything. Okay. Sometimes my flash doesn't fire. Does this ever happen to you? Is this normal? So I actually Googled like the most common reason that a flash doesn't fire. A flash might not fire sometimes because it's not fully charged due to weak batteries and needs time to recharge after a previous firing. Sometimes your flash isn't properly mounted on your camera, or your flash is set to a mode where it won't fire in certain lighting conditions, or the camera shutter speed is too fast for the flash sync speed. So that's what I was talking about earlier with like getting those big like black bars in your photos and stuff. If your shutter speed is too high, your flash quite literally cannot keep up with your shutter speed. So if you're someone that shoots in like high speed continuous, you might want to go down to like medium or like low speed for your shutter because your flash is quite literally not going to be able to keep up with that. So essentially, the flash might not be ready to fire when you press the shutter button. I do feel like a big reason that my flash doesn't fire is sometimes like my batteries aren't charged. That's what I learned when I was using a flash with AA batteries. A big issue was just the fact that my like I'd be like, why isn't this working? Why isn't it firing? And then I changed my batteries and it would work perfect. So check that for sure. I'm always bringing an extra spare flash battery that's fully charged just in case I'm like shooting something. I'm like, this is not fast enough. Quick solution, swap out the battery, see if that helps. Okay. How do you take a big group photo with a flash? So key here is making sure your aperture is high. It's the same as taking a big group photo in any other scenario. You basically just set up a test shot, get your lighting how you want it, and just make sure your aperture is high enough to capture everything. I actually feel like taking group photos with flash is easier because I know my lighting is going to be good. So I can just set my aperture really high and just be done with it. Whereas like if I'm outside, if it's darker, but my aperture has to be higher, I'm like messing around with all my camera settings and it's just a lot. So yeah, it's pretty easy. For super dark places with no lighting, what do you recommend? I would recommend a flash. I've been loving ambient light lately, I will say. Like at a wedding, if there's string lights, if there's candles, I like to just leave it and just use my ISO as high as I'm comfortable with and then start to use my flash. But just like the nature of the situation is when you use a flash, I feel like you can't predict the unpredictable. Like you aren't able to just turn and shoot some random thing across the room like you could if you were just not using a flash. And it's also like slower too. Like it's just the nature of it. Flash isn't as fast as if you have your your shutter at like 1/1000 and you're on high speed continuous. Like it's just not going to be as fast. So I feel like, I don't know. I've been loving ambient light if I can use it, but if not, I am using a flash. In a large church with tall ceilings, how would you shoot flash when a bride enters? Honestly, if there is a high stakes situation, I'm trying my absolute best not to use a flash because like I said, I feel like I can't, like, yes, my recycle time is high, but like if something were to happen in that split second between my flash going off and like it not going off, like I wouldn't be able to capture that. Plus sometimes in a church, you're not allowed to use flash. Now if the lighting truly sucks, you're using flash. Tall ceilings, which means you won't be able to bounce your flash off the ceiling. So then I would recommend having a diffuser in pocket, pointing your flash slightly towards your subject, not full direct flash, but like if we're talking the distant, like it basically right in between, right at the ceiling and right at your client, like kind of halfway, use that diffuser. And I probably would use manual flash settings at this point, or I'd use TTL mode, and my goal would be to make the flash not really bright, because you don't really want, these are very timeless pictures. So you want to make sure that it's not giving direct flash. Like you want to make sure they don't have red eye or anything like that. So I would try to do the most subtle flash as possible. Okay. And then the last question I had is, how do you not overexpose a flash photo? And this kind of goes back to the whole idea of using TTL mode. That's the best way to not overexpose a flash photo, is to use TTL mode. So then it knows, like, it can detect if someone's close to you or far away, and it won't, make the flash too bright. Other ways is, just quite literally bringing your ISO lower than it needs to be, or your aperture higher than it needs to be to kind of help with that exposure. I would always prefer to have a photo that's too dark than a photo that's too light. I could always bring back things from the shadows, but you can't, once you lose the detail and the highlights, you can't get that back. So yeah, that's the main thing that I'm going to do. And we're always taking a test shot too, to make sure that we don't overexpose as well. Okay, guys. Wow. Oh, last thing I wanted to say, Godox V100. That is my current flash recommendation. Current one I'm obsessed with. It's about $350. I have it linked to my Amazon storefront. Okay. That is all. Thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode. Sorry, it's a little bit shorter, but there's only so much we can talk about flash. There's only so much we can dilly-dally today. So I figured you guys can get on with the rest of your day. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope everyone has an amazing rest of their week.